Madam Chair, staff is ready to begin.
Thank you. We will now call the Town of Hilton Head Island Design Review Board meeting for Tuesday, December 14th, 2021 to order. Teresa, are we in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act?
Yes, ma'am, we are.
Would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Mr. Brown?
Present.
Ms. Lippert?
Here.
Mr. McAllister?
Here.
Mr. Molesky?
Here.
Mr. Karstens?
Here.
Mr. Bassett?
Here.
Ms. Foss?
Here. Thank you. Does staff have any changes to the agenda?
I'm sorry, no ma'am, not at this time.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move to approve the agenda as submitted.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Thank you. Any opposed? Motion passes by a vote of 7. Has everyone had a chance to read the meeting minutes of November 9th? And if so, do you have any changes to the minutes? If there are none, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the November 9th, 2021 meeting?
I move that we approve the minutes from the November 9th, 2021 meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Any opposed? There are none. The motion passes by a vote of 7. Teresa, do we have any appearances by citizens?
Madam Chair, we do not have any appearance by citizens at this time. I will note that public comments concerning the agenda items were to be submitted electronically via the open town hall portal. The portal closed at 12:15 today, and there were no comments of record. In addition to submitting comments on the portal, citizens were provided the opportunity to call into the meeting to comment. However, there were no requests to give comments by phone. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no unfinished business, we can move on to new business. We'll start with new development for final review, Waterfront Restaurant DRB-002-657-2021. Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On September 28th, the DRB granted conceptual approval to this project. This restaurant aims to embody the character of the existing waterfront with a modern island character. The restaurant is part of several improvements on the site in conformance with the property's restrictive covenants. A partial demolition and refacing of the marine office building has been approved by the DRB in a separate project. The new restaurant will have expansive views of Skull Creek and will anchor the site with waterfront, seafood, dock, and marine operations. It sits back from the creek in the clearing and maintains the existing lawn space buffering the waterfront. The entrance is nestled between the large live oak trees for an arrival experience. Loading and back of house spaces are located to the right of the site with restricted access to the marine railway. 2 gable elements reminiscent of old boat barns bookend an open dining roof, which reduces the scale of the second floor and the building overall. Honest materials have been selected which nod to the new seafood market and to form a modern island character. The stucco body of the building forms a backdrop on a board-formed concrete wall, marking the restaurant entrance. Board and batten siding above evokes the material of a traditional waterfront, accented by warehouse light fixtures and a metal roof. At the porches, steel beams are supported by round concrete columns, which will be cast to express the lines of the formwork. Wood-look aluminum louvers define the rear elevation, providing visual interest and sun control for the dining room. Staff recommends approval with the following conditions. Reduce the amount of lawn area on the site, and we'll specifically look at that. Specifically in the parking lot, there's some opportunities. And 2, specify the utility line under the 53-inch live oak shown on the site improvements plan to be abandoned in place. 3, provide a tree protection plan showing tree protection fence and specified pre and post-construction fertilization and mycore treatment for the 53-inch live oak. Staff's concern is that since this is such a major part of the design, that it should be, we want to guarantee that it's going to be there. And 4, after construction. And 4, provide tree lighting details that do not damage the tree. The site is outlined in red on your screen. This is the site plan, or I'm sorry, this is a survey. This is the site plan. And you can see the parking area here with the restaurant. This is where the 53-inch live oak is. And this is that line they're talking about. We're talking about utility line. This is the layout, interior layout of the restaurant. First floor, this is second floor. First lower floor roof plan, then the upper floor roof plan. Wall details, elevations of the proposed building. More construction details and wall sections. This is the proposed color board. Landscape plan. Staff is suggesting that some of these lawn areas or most of these sod areas could be planted out to help reduce that. They could be planted with ornamental grasses. This is the lighting plan. Again, any lights in or attached to the trees should use a collar system that doesn't, that there aren't any penetrations into the bark that would allow for disease to get in, and that this tree should be specified for mycore and pre and post construction fertilization because of all the construction really on all 4 sides of it. This is the lighting plan. Earlier staff, not included in staff's comments, are how bright the porch is. Those light levels just seem a little excessive. In talking to the applicant, he has assured us that they're on dimmers and that they would be dimmed for most of the time. Parking lot lighting plan, again, compliant with the LMO. And these are cut sheets for the light fixtures and site furniture. I'm going to run through them fairly quickly. They're here for your reference in the discussion if you need. Fan fixtures. All of them are 3,000 Kelvin or less. Heating elements on the porch and how they're mounted. Here's the landscape lighting. Bollard lights. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Chris. Do we have the applicants available for this project?
Yes, good afternoon. This is Joe DePaul, architect with PDG Architects. Also have on the call today, Brendan Riley with Coastal Restaurants and Bars.
Thank you. You will have 10 minutes to discuss the project beyond what Chris has presented.
Thank you. I think Chris did a good job of summarizing the project, and you all have seen this before. A couple of responses to his comments. In general, we have no issue with the tree protection notes here, and we'll provide clarifications to staff and details for the lighting on the tree. With regard to the amount of lawn area on the site in the parking lots, our goal is to abide by the LMO and to create a nice parking lot, but we are trying to not overplant the parking lot. We have some nice plantings on the ends and have provided trees in the middle of the runs of parking bays in between the parking bays and aisles. Referencing in that Dockside's parking lot, which has a very similar landscape, but does not have the live oaks included in between the drive aisles. They've just got trees at the end. So we were kind of using that as a reference for what the minimum amount of work would be, but also kind of want to dress that up and dressing it up on the islands at the end of the parking bays. And then with regard to the lighting on the back porch, our intent is to have a nice ambient lighting for dining and not to overblow that area with overlighting it. We don't want light bombs back there. There is the up-down light, the galvanized up-down light that is on the columns and pilasters on that porch is 700 lumens from the factory. It's a LED, and we plan to put that on a dimmer so that we can control the light there. And then the fan light is a screw-in bulb, so we can screw in whatever bulb we want. That will be easy to control, and generally back there, the idea is to create a nice ambient lighting and not a harsh bright light. Yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Does Mr. Riley have anything to comment?
Oh, the only thing I have is those ornamental grasses. If we plant ornamental grasses between parking lots, they're just going to get trampled. So I don't know that they're going to look good past the first week.
Thank you. We will begin with the board discussion, starting with Mr. Brown.
Good afternoon. Overall, I support the application, and the amount of turf in the parking lot did catch my eye. I would appreciate some feedback from the landscape architects. I also agree with staff's comments about tree preservation. But other than that, I'm prepared to support the application today. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lipper.
Thank you. In general, I agree that it's going to be a nice complex with the 2 new buildings and the modifications to the front building. I agree with staff that there's too much grass. It is going to be high traffic areas. I completely agree with you on that, which is why I don't think that grass will really grow there. It's going to end up being mostly dirt, but I too will defer to the landscape architects, though my preference would be for some low plant material. Chris, I know you felt comfortable with all the lights being under 3,000. I didn't see that called out on fixture EF. So I was just I guess looking for that confirmation. And
Yes, we intend all of the lighting to be 3,000 lumens.
Okay, perfect. And then fixture EK is called out to be a white fixture. Now, I know that we typically don't approve white, black, or galvanized. I think we're all I don't want to speak for the board, but in generally in the past conversations about this site, because of picking up on the vernacular of sort of boat buildings, we've said that galvanized works in this particular instance. But to me, the EK in white deviates from that yet more. So I think that one would need to get revised. I think the color board is nice. And I just have really one key component on A201 on the left elevation. There we go, perfect. So under that sign, I completely understand you're indicating a closed faux shutter and then a window with an open shutter, but in reality is a faux shutter situation would still be implied of being able to open up. The space isn't there. I don't think it's working because it's too cramped. There would need to be more separation as it is, let's say, on the front elevation, where there would be the space for both shutters to open. So I think that arrangement needs to get revised. How to do that? You know, I think there are many options. You could walk away from the shutters in that condition and do a panel on the paired one, because I understand you want the light in that space behind the actual one. But to me, that needs to get modified. We'll see how the rest of the board feels about it. Those are all the comments I had. Thank you.
If I may clarify a couple items on that white light. That light is actually on the inside of the parapet wall facing the upper deck. It will not be visible from anywhere on the exterior. And that color was chosen. We like the fixture, and that color was chosen to complement the stucco color. The other option was a little bit incongruous with that. And then with regard to the shutters, there are a lot of examples, especially in Bluffton, of old shutters where the windows are close together and one shutter leaf actually just opens over the top of the other one, and they interfere. But that's fine. It's a little bit more of a historic application, vernacular application of shutters.
I just don't think it works. Despite, I appreciate your explanation, I don't think it works.
Thank you. We'll move on to Mr. McAllister.
All right, thank you. I'll start with the parking lot and the grass, since I'm the first landscape architect to speak. That was my assessment after the first review as well. I was right in step with staff. I did feel like the grass and the parking lot was a little excessive. One question I have about the parking lot, I didn't see on the civil plans or the landscape plan what the material of the actual parking stall is called out as. And I see there's 2 hatches, so I assume there's like a permeable paver. And then can you clarify what the actual stall material is?
The stalls are intended to be gravel.
Okay. Well, to me, that being said, since you don't have any curbing, it looks like you've got inlets in the median, so everything's going to slope down. And I didn't see a grading plan, so I don't know how much of a depression there's going to be in there. But to me, honestly, I think it'd be more appropriate to have some grasses and mulch. And I'm not saying it all has to be grasses. I know you want to be conscious of cost and maintenance and all that stuff, but I could see gravel just getting displaced into that median. So to me, that's a good reason to do little strategic groupings of grasses. So that's my assessment. Not saying that has to happen throughout the entire parking lot, but I think maybe up closer to the building, there's some islands where that would be appropriate. Let's see. I had overall for the architecture, I think you've done a great job on it. Admittedly, since I'm not an architect, I think a color elevation would have helped me understand everything. I sort of had to switch back and forth to sort of pick up keys between the material board and the elevations, but I understand it, and it's, I think, very well done. I think some of the architectural things you've done horizontally kind of brings the visual scale down, so appreciate that. Let's see. I am in support of the staff comments in terms of the fertilization for the live oak and the lighting comments. Let's see. And I did notice on the civil plan, it looks like there's one kind of like weird discrepancy on the parking lot at the end. It didn't quite jive with the landscape plan, but just pointing that out for your civil to pick up. And the only other landscape comment I had, and I'll just throw it out there. I know, so you've got, this awesome back facade of the building. And I know views out to the Broad Creek or everything, or Skull Creek. I know that's everything, and I don't want to discourage you from keeping low material, but I'll just throw it out there. You got like a 45-foot building, and your sort of foundation shrubs are, 6 inches tall with the Asiatic jasmine. I would just maybe consider exploring something that gets like 2 feet tall. Again, I understand views are everything for this, in that back facade, but something that's a little bit more appropriate for the scale, I think would help me. But I'll just throw that out there if nobody else feels the same. If Judd doesn't feel that way, then so be it. But those are my comments.
Thank you. Mr. Molesky.
Yes, thank you. And overall, I love how it looks, great proportions, like the finishes. I had a question where the boat launch is shown there. Is there any plans for any improvements to that area? And the reason that I ask is, could there be any potential interference with whatever kind of forklift that would put boats in and out there and the flow of traffic? I'm assuming this place will end up being slamming busy. Is that phase 3 that we'll learn about next month, or what are you able to share?
That's an existing business that's there now, and he needs the space. So it's a railway that they tow the boats up and fix on it. So we can't really cramp the space around it.
Okay, so it's not a situation where people are going to be driving down Squire Pope Road and dropping off their boats to put in there. Like I'm not that familiar to know. Is there?
No, it's an actual railroad that's into the water that they put the shrimp boats on, and or any large vessel, and can rail it up with a winch and then work on it and then put it back in.
So those are only the boats will be coming from the water, pulled out for maintenance and repairs, not necessarily anybody coming off of Squire Pope.
Correct. It is not a launch. It is a maintenance operation that's there.
Okay, so then that, is there a decorative fence to kind of shield that, or is that part of the appeal of the experience to go and feel like you're one with the shrimp boats?
It's a part of the experience.
Okay, thank you for that. And then just to, if you could provide some more clarification on the parking lot there. So now the actual stalls are some type of gravel, and then the portions that you would drive up and down those areas there, that is asphalt?
Correct. It's just like Dockside's parking lot, asphalt driveways with gravel parking
Okay,
and
then
grass
there's-
median.
There are stop bars, it looks like, shown on there, correct?
Correct. We're required to have stop bars.
Okay, so as far as maintaining a separation of the gravel to the sod, what is the proposed?
Across the front, it's retained with a concrete curb, and then across the back, I think we are proposing a steel, a tall piece of steel that would retain it on the back edge. And if the traffic department isn't happy with that with DPR, it'll be a concrete curb.
Okay, so to delineate the sod from the gravel, there is a concrete curb there, or that's the tall metal that you were?
That would be the tall metal. The concrete curb is between the asphalt drive and the gravel parking.
Okay, and then the walkways that you have there, so if somebody parks in the back, yeah, thank you very much, that is what material?
That is concrete.
That's concrete, okay, so those are concrete, asphalt, gravel, and sod.
Yes.
And even on the, what would you, I don't know what you call it, but like on the perimeter portion of where there's, would be sod, is there additional plantings in those areas? It's just,
Yeah, the islands have a pair of live oaks each, and then some plantings around the base of them. That is in the landscape plan, which is up a couple pages, Chris. So you can see each landscape island on the end of the parking bay has a live oak and a mulched area underneath it. The grass is running up into.
okay, so I'm assuming as those live oaks mature, that they would perhaps create enough shade that the sod wouldn't grow then, so that's why we're just kind of connecting those clusters of live oaks with sod, just to kind of keep the dirt and dust down, was the intention.
Right, so the sod is a continuation of the 6-foot strip between the two parking bays, and then you can see where it's not shaded in underneath the tree. That'll be mulch with, I think that's saw palms
Okay.
at the
Yeah, I
base
mean,
of it.
that's good. I was just unclear on that. So thanks for that. Thanks for the explanation on the boat launch. Otherwise, I wish I had more to add, but I think it looks great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. We'll move on to Mr. Karstens.
All right, thank you. Thus far, I've heard a number of my thoughts and comments addressed. Mr. McAllister kind of hit on, and so did Mr. Molesky, as far as I think we're gonna, ultimately, I'd like to see, make sure that in the package is a site plan that calls out the different pavement materials. I think we've discussed the fact that there's gravel and asphalt and that there might be a permeable paving closer to the 52-inch live oak. But I think to make sure, I would say is let's, even if it has to be on top of Pat's L1 or his landscape plan, because he's already called out a couple things in regards to site features, that it might just be helpful to have that in the end package, having a site plan that calls out the different materials. Chris, I would say is, can we update the comment sheet to indicate it as the 52-inch live oak? Because I got confused looking for a 53, and I know it's the one by the building. So if those can be updated, it's showing up as 52 in all my plans.
I understand. My apologies.
It's okay. Along with the pavement schedule, we don't have any site furnishings. I see that there's a couple benches. I'd like for those to be consistent with the seafood market and the marine office updates. So whatever furnishings when it comes to the benches and such, I want staff to be able to see that those are consistent across the whole complex, and obviously appropriate to match anything going on in the restaurant would be fine. There's a wood boardwalk indicated over the rain garden on the southern portion of the building. We weren't provided with the detail of that. You know, we also don't have site grading, so understanding whether or not that's just a simple boardwalk that's not even going to have a kick rail or anything like that associated as far as a barrier. Understanding you're making a transition across from different parking areas and across the side of the building. If staff could have, you know, a detailed review on that, I'd appreciate that. I had a question like Miss Lippert as far as the EK fixture, understanding that I guess it's a string light, but considering it's out of view, I'm more apt in the fact that it is going to be associated with dining. You know, string lights are kind of, you know, they're kind of a case by case thing. With the lawn areas within the parking lot, considering that in comparison to some of the other areas on this roadway where the parking areas actually have raised grass medians, the fact that these are going to be depressed and that they clearly are picking up the storm drainage for the site, I encourage you to stay away from sod, and really ultimately with maintenance, if it could be just kind of a planting area. I know the circulation between the different sides, you've covered it very well in regards to these concrete pathways between, you know, these runs of parking. So I think that folks are going to be able to navigate their way across this relatively easily, but I'd encourage you to plant, you know, these medians just to keep folks out of them, especially if, you know, with the rains that we get, you know, they might end up being a little bit of a mess anyhow, and staying away from sod will only help that. Just something for staff, we'll want to make sure that the plant schedule, that the Encore azaleas are labeled as such. They're showing up as the Pringles photocarpus in the plant schedule. And then my last thing for Joe and Brendan would be, you've obviously got nice circulation when it comes to the parking, except for one stall, the one that ends with the 50-inch live oak. What I'd request is either at the end of that stall, you know, making sure that people can still make the 3-point turn or the turnaround in there, is either there to be some bollards associated with the end of that run of parking, or some some shrub planting, something of substantial, because I'd really like to discourage, I think you need to discourage anybody from parking around that tree, or even cutting through at the end of that stall. So I think there's going to need to be a barrier at the end of the stall, maybe not something associated with the streetscape there on the entry, but and you know, some simple bollards, you know, some wood bollards would suffice. Something to match even what you have going on over at the boat launch side would work great. But I think there's going to need to be something at the end of that dead end parking just to discourage folks from pushing through there. All in all, I think it's excellent. Again, I'd feel better if staff had a chance to have a site plan that had all the materials called out, all the horizontal materials called out, and you know, furnishings associated with that, just submitted as far as the final. I think staff level is fine because they're viewing this as, you know, as this whole complex. So, but I appreciate the submittal, and that's it for me.
Thank you. Mr. Bassett?
Yes, I really like this project, have kind of from the start, appreciate some of the horizontal elements that bring the building down, and the fact that it doesn't have kind of a massive scale of presentation. I do agree with Mr. McAllister. Probably the further discussion is warranted as to the height of the plantings along the rear. Yeah, it does make sense that the view needs to be preserved, but there's a slope there where maybe something could be, you know, some larger plantings in the rear to kind of bring that down a little bit more. And then, you know, with the white lights, I noticed that as well on the EK fixtures, but it does make sense that those are concealed. I think as long as those are concealed, I don't have any concern about that, you know, as long as they're in the dining area and not, you know, and are hidden from view from the, you know, parking lot or any approaches. And then the what Mr. Carson said about protection of that live oak, I think that makes a lot of sense. Just something to prevent someone from, you know, driving through there as a shortcut, whether it's after hours or just, you know, not noticing what they're doing, something to just provide good protection there from someone who has a vehicle capable of rolling through there pretty easily, kind kind of keep them from being able to. But that's really all I have.
Thank you. I'm in agreement with there being too much sod in the parking lot, and I think Mr. Karstens and Mr. McAllister brought up great reasons for not having it. I agree with we needing higher shrubs or such on the back elevation just to break up the building a little bit better. I also think protecting that live oak in the parking lot is a good idea. And then I hadn't really noticed Ms. Lippert's comment on the elevations, the left elevation shutters. And now that I look at it, I kind of agree with her, but no one else on the board addressed that. I'll get back to everyone in a minute. Otherwise, I think the project looks really, really nice. And but I would like everyone to sort of comment what their thoughts are on the shutters on that left elevation. If we don't mind, Mr. Brown.
Could you come back to me? I'm zooming into it on my screen. Thank you.
Yes. Mr. McAllister.
Honestly, it didn't catch my eye, and I certainly respect Ms. Lippert's opinion. It didn't bother me, but if the board feels strongly otherwise, then I'll support it. But for the record, I guess I would say I'm okay as it was submitted.
Thank you. Mr. Molesky.
I will go along with what the architect has presented in this particular case. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Karstens.
Joe, what's the trim color again? I know we have the cast iron for the vertical for the board and batten, and then it's a red for the I guess okay. I see windows and window trim are both going to be red. I think the fact that you have a different presentation on the shutter will help, in my mind, differentiate it between the closed and the open, and the fact that they are, close together is less of a concern for me in that regard. As a quick sidebar, I'm in favor of utilizing, when it comes to that back edge of the patio, I'm in favor of utilizing some of the material that has already been presented, either as the dwarf yopon or even some of the purple pixie lower pedalum on that back edge. If the idea is to have more of a shrub edge between the patio and that exterior walk on the backside. So along with Mr. McAllister, I'll say that, utilizing again some of the dwarf plant material that is a shrub level material across there versus just the jasmine itself, I'm in favor of that. So I think that'd be good. But in regards to the left elevation, I think for me, the presentation and the opening shut windows and how the shutters themselves are presented, I'm fine with that as it is in the plan and the elevation.
Thank you. Mr. Bassett.
I would love to hear what Mrs. Lippert, if she can elaborate on her concerns about the shutters, because I'm certainly open to, kind of looking more closely at those. I hadn't, previously had any issue with them or any concerns about it. I like the overall look, and
yeah, my main concern is, to me, it looks like there isn't sufficient space for two windows. I mean, that shutter may not even really end up clearing the trim of the faux shutters in the closed position. And I really think it would need to have sufficient space, even though it's a faux closed shutter, to be able to imagine it as open and space between the open shutters of both windows, much like you're seeing in the front elevation, where if you imagine those two pairs of faux shutters being opened, the half of those shutters would still leave a gap of siding in between, and this, it just feels like it's crashing into each other. And it needs some breathing room to have more of the, just, it needs some breathing room. It feels like there's too much packed into that, into too little space.
Mr. Bassett?
I can see that and have a tendency to agree there. I have seen in historic application, you know, in say Savannah or Charleston, shutters that truly overlap. But I do agree that it seems a little tight.
Thank you. We'll go back to Mr. Brown.
It didn't catch my eye until I zoomed in and I can see it. I don't think it's going to catch most people's eye on the site. If there's an opportunity to create some more space, I would support that, but I really support it as drawn as well. I don't have a strong opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else on the board have any further discussion points? If not, could I get a motion on the application? For the record, I had 3 yeses, the shutters were too tight, and 4 no's that they were okay. So if that's stalling anyone, that's over. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'd like to make just a comment. I really appreciate Judd's comment on that 50-inch oak there. And I don't know if it's up to us as the board to suggest what a solution is, or if Joe or the other gentleman there kind of already have something that they would prescribe that we could make part of our comments.
Can we go back to that page?
Yeah, I mean, John, I think that is a good comment that Judd has there. And we would use some plantings at the base of that tree to provide an end to that drive aisle right there. So we can provide plantings for staff approval.
I would ask, is there any reason why not to even continue a concrete curb? Because I could see that being a great 3-point opportunity there. I understand that, but then that also, like whatever we could do to discourage people from driving. I don't mean to be oversensitive about the live oak, but I would assume that people driving over and over it again could stress it. Maybe, I don't know, the landscape architects could elaborate more if there's any merit to that.
But that live oak is there where the existing drive aisle has been since like the 50s, right? That's the one we're talking about?
Yeah, and it's got a lot of paving underneath it. John, we don't have any raised curbs on this. The paving runs off into the landscape so that we can get drainage. I think plantings would be sufficient there to prevent somebody from parking in that spot. You're not going to try to drive on top of plants, or you want to drive over a curb.
With respect to Joe, staff would suggest and agree that a bollard would be better option. People actually do tend to drive over plants. So
Okay.
bollards, and it doesn't have to be anything elaborate, just a wooden bollard. And they don't have to be many of them, just enough to keep cars off that area.
Yeah, we might use that post and rope detail that we have over by the boat launch then on that location.
Staff would not be opposed to post and rope, but the rope is not necessary. I think the bollards, but again, if that's how you all want to work it.
I think matching detail from another part of the property makes sense.
I'd support post and rope.
Thank you. Now may I have a motion on the application?
All right, I'll make a motion. I will make a motion regarding waterfront restaurant DRB 002657-2021 with the following conditions: that staff's recommended conditions be attached to this motion. The clarification that that is a 52-inch live oak and not a 53-inch live oak. Any new furnishings should be consistent throughout the site, and that can be reviewed by staff. Staff to also review the boardwalk detail that was not included in this package. Provide bollards at the end of the drive aisle to protect the 50-inch live oak. Let's see. Revisit the plantings at the rear of the building. Consider dwarf shrubs that get at least 2 feet tall. And I think that's all I wrote down. If I missed anything, anybody's comment, please feel free to amend my motion.
I would like to amend that the different pavement materials be called out on the plans.
Yes.
Anyone else? All right, may I have a second?
Second,
Thank you. Teresa, please call the roll.
Mr. Brown,
For the motion.
Miss Lippert,
Approve.
Mr. McAllister,
Yes.
Mr. Molesky, Mr. Karstens,
yes.
Mr. Bassett,
Yes.
Miss Foss.
Yes,
Motion carries 7-0.
thank you. We will move on to Heritage Academy Pavilion DRB 002658-2021. And Mr. Karstens will be recusing himself from this project.
All right, thank you.
We have a presentation from Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This proposal is for the demolition of the existing, I'm sorry, wrong script. This project consists of an open-air picnic pavilion to be built on the lot next to the existing campus. The pavilion will be used for outdoor teaching, eating, lunch, and programs. There is also a paved area for basketball and outdoor demonstration garden area. The structure is heavy timber and CMU oyster shell stucco columns. The colors and materials are to match the existing building on campus. The roof.
Chris, sorry to interrupt, but we can't see your screen.
I am so sorry. Can you see the aerial now?
No.
Just a moment while we fix or attempt to fix a technical issue. Excuse me. Okay, I'm going to sign out and sign back in. Hopefully that'll clear the glitch. Hold on just a minute. Teresa, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so everybody can see the aerial.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Annette, for the heads up. Okay, the colors and materials are to match the existing building on campus. The roof structure is an exposed truss system, which will be stained in a color similar to the painted wood on the school building. Staff recommends approval with the following conditions. Shift the building to preserve the 28-inch pine on the right-hand side. 2, revise the location of the tree protection fence to run the entire length of the New Orleans buffer and preserve the 11-inch gum and 7-inch water oak. And I'll let the applicant address this, but there was a construction entrance required at that point, and that's the least offensive spot to put it. So that might be a moot point. And 3, coordinate view corridors to the rear buffer with the natural resource planner. staff's issue or that comment is based on staff's concern that there's just a blanket note that covers underbrushing in that area, and that underbrushing should be preserved, but views can be opened up. So let's look at the site and look at the application. Here's the site plan. You can see the building sits here, the pavilion sits here with the multi-use court, for lack of a better word, out in front. And New Orleans runs along the bottom with the Heritage Academy building right here. You can see the proposed grading. Again, note the storm drains that are proposed to go in. And the proposed, I'm sorry, let me back up. This is where the silt fence and tree protection turns to allow for that access, construction access into the site. Proposed planting plan here. Again, this back area, there's the existing understory should be preserved with the exception of view corridors out to the golf course on the back side. Planting details, proposed site furniture. Here's your tree protection fence detail. A plan for the pavilion. Note the lights and the fans. Section through the pavilion and an elevation of the pavilion. Typical wall section. Foundation plan. Roof framing. Construction details. Again, the trusses. This is the color board. You can see the existing building and what they're looking to match. Proposed light fixtures on the building. There's the can, the fans, and that concludes staff's presentation. Madam Chair,
Yes,
that concludes staff's presentation.
thank you. Is the applicant available?
Yes, Joe DePaul with PDG Architects.
Thank you. You have 10 minutes to add to Chris's narrative.
All right, thank you. I think Chris did a good job of summarizing the project. With respect to the 28-inch loblolly pine, we will shift the building slightly to be able to save that tree. It's about 3 feet planned left and 2 feet down the page. We're expecting that shift to be needed to save that tree. And Chris is correct, the 11-inch gum and 7-inch water oak are being removed for construction access, but we will be going back with a 15-foot type B buffer after construction. And that's my comments.
Can you show us again where that building will be moving?
It's slightly to the left. And,
Okay,
and then down slightly, about 2 feet down.
okay,
This is the pine in question,
all right.
and it is approaching it. Well, it is a significant tree size, and so they're avoiding a required staff waiver by moving this building.
Okay, thank you. We'll begin with the discussion order with Mr. Bassett.
And Chris, can you show where the construction access is that would eliminate those 2 trees that you suggested retaining?
Yes, sir. This is the tree protection and silt fence line, that yellow line, and those are the 2 trees right there. So the construction access will be off of New Orleans here to the site.
So I had one comment initially. It was the A1 floodlights, just to take care that I understand the need for some motion sensor floodlights on the structure to, after hours, keep people from just, roaming around the area or loitering there. But I would say, take great care, especially once the view corridor is opened up to the rear, to make sure that those lights aren't aimed in the direction of the houses or the residential areas across the golf course and shipyard. I don't know if they need to be more down facing or what, but they do seem to be on the end of the building where they might not be as much of an issue, but just be aware of, I guess, the potential for that. And then with the construction entrance, I would just say my only concern there is make sure that the plantings afterwards will kind of prevent that area from becoming an extension of the existing parking for Heritage Academy and an informal overflow parking space, where people could come from the, basically where your new pathway is going to be, or where the construction entrance is off of New Orleans Road. It looks like kind of an ideal spot to informally park when there's a need for overflow. When I looked at the site, there, the parking lot was pretty full. And it looks like there might be need for additional parking. So I would say make sure it's planted with an adequate buffer to prevent people from doing that, until such time that a parking plan is potentially submitted in the future, and for approval, if that makes sense. Basically, keep it planted to make sure people don't park there.
Thank you. Mr. Molesky?
I was waiting for Judd, but I forgot that he was reclused. So let's see. I like the palms and the oaks and all the nice stuff you have along the street there. Is there going to be any type of fencing or deterrent just to keep people? I know this is just supposed to be private only for Heritage Academy folks. So there's no other type of fencing around the perimeter to discourage that. Is that correct?
No fencing, no.
Is there any merit? Let's see how that nice little walkway comes in and connects to the parking lot, and it looks like you had dimensions on somewhere. I saw there was like 15 foot wide and by 4 feet or something right there where it joins the Heritage Academy parking lot. Is there any consideration to having some type of decorative columns on either side with, like a little aluminum gate or something that, makes it feel like, hey, you're not supposed to be here. And then there's podocarpus or something to that effect, kind of making a faux little wall to the left and right, or you guys don't necessarily have any concern of this basketball court just attracting anybody just to go park there and hang out, or?
The school doesn't have that concern. And obviously cost would be a consideration and a reason that we would not want to add a gate in there with bollards.
So that walkway is just concrete then, that'll just match the basketball court then, it looks like, with the?
Yes.
I mean, other than that's my only thing that I could see. I think probably when people are here on vacation, they're probably not even paying attention when they're driving up and down New Orleans Road. And I guess if the school students want to go and hang out there, that's the whole intention. So I'll leave it go at that. Otherwise, it looks great. Good to see you, Joe. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Lippert?
Thank you. I agree with staff comments. I completely agree with Mr. Bassett's comment about the A1 floodlights to verify that there's going to be no light pollution to the neighbors. And that I have no comments.
Thank you. Mr. McAllister?
Think it looks great. Really don't have any comments. I did notice on one of the elevations that there was an add alternate for the roof material. So Joe, do you know what that would be? So if we did make a motion and you guys decided to go with a metal roof, we could cover it in an approval.
No, I mean, at this point, we're keeping with the materials we submitted. I can remove that note.
Okay,
Um,
no problem. I just want to make sure we didn't put you in a tough spot if you guys wanted to change the roof.
Understood.
But I have no other comment. I support staff's recommendations.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Just two comments. The first thing I thought when I saw the 28-inch loblolly is remove the 28 and try to save the 26. But if the applicant doesn't have any issues shifting the building, that's a moot point. The second comment I have, which is the last comment, has to do with the storm lines. On the east and west side of the site, there's the HDPE lines, and I see the rim elevations, but I don't see any invert elevations on the pipe. And I see the contours they're dying into, so I'm making some assumptions. But I'm hoping that staff will look at this when they're reviewing the DPR. Specifically, I mean, what's downstream of those pipes? That's an adjacent use buffer, it's a wetland buffer. Is it riprap? Is it plant material? Because I think if it's just disturbed and mulched, it may wash into that lagoon. But other than that, I support the application. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw in some notes that you were Joe, that you had some conduit covers. Do you have specifications on those?
So the conduit is covered by some treated wood, stain treated wood that will plow out the back. So it's a wood element. And it's called out in the details.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure we were on there. I agree with the possible light pollution on the floodlights. That was a good comment, Mr. Bassett. And other than that, I agree with staff comments, and that's all I have. Does anyone have any further discussion? If not, could I get a motion on the application? I will go ahead and make a motion for Heritage Pavilion DRB -002658-2021 to include all of staff comments, the movement of the building over to save the 28-inch pine, be careful of the floodlights and any light pollution that may happen from them, and remove the add alternate to the roof on your plans. And I think that's it. Does anyone have any amendments or would like to second that?
I'll second.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Teresa, please call the roll.
Mr. Brown,
For the motion,
Ms. Lippert,
Yes.
Mr. McAllister,
Yes.
Mr. Molesky,
Yes.
Mr. Bassett,
Yes.
Ms. Foss.
Yes,
Motion carries 6-0.
thank you. We'll move on to Bistro 17 DRB 002573-2021. This is for an alteration addition.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This proposal is for the demolition of the existing canvas roof structure covering the back patio area of Bistro 17 and replacing it with a wood trellis flat roof structure. It will cover approximately the same area as the existing structure. The new structure will consist of treated 6x6 posts with heavy timber beams and rafters to match the other 3 wood trellis structures, and I'll show you those on this plan, located along the marina. The ceiling will be stained, will be stained grade 1x6 V groove with metal roof panels to match the existing roof on the building. This structure will be concealed. This structure will have concealed conduit between the ceiling and the roof structure. Staff recommends approval as submitted. So in light of the issues we just had, can everybody see my screen and Shelter Cove? Great, thank you. San Miguel's and their covered patio is located right here. You'll note the color of the roof, along with, I'm sorry, it's recently changed. It's a new, actually you all approved, I think, a handrail change earlier, but the roof structure here and the same color roof. And then Scott's Fish Market is over here. Now, this is an old aerial, so it still shows the blue canvas or awning system, but there's a awning system over here that covers this patio. So we're looking at this area and replacing that awning with one that will match these structures. Everybody understand? Great, thank you. So I mentioned that Scott's was done, and this is Scott's as it is. Again, the aerial was an earlier aerial that did not show this new construction. This is that middle restaurant, and I'm sorry I can't think of the name of it. And this is San Miguel's on the far end. This is the proposed structure and section through it, and elevation of what it will look like, and photos of where it's going. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Chris. Is
Yes,
the
ma'am.
applicant available?
Yes, Tim Probst from PDG Architects.
Thank you. You have 10 minutes to add to Chris's narrative.
I think Chris got everything. The restaurant you're trying to think of, Chris, is Top Dog.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I didn't want him to dwell in your head all day. That's it. Chris pretty much got everything.
Thank you. We'll
Yep.
start discussion with Mr. Brown.
I support the application. I do have a question for Chris. When I was looking at the material samples at Town Hall, I didn't see anything for this application. And I know they're trying to match existing, and I'm just making some assumptions. What's the gutter going to look like? What are the downspouts going to look like? Could you walk us through that, Chris?
Staff did not require a color board because it's the same architect that's done all three of these systems, and they're noted to match on the drawings. They're noted to match the others. So the thinking is, you're out there and something doesn't match, then we'll certainly we'll call them on it because it's on the drawings. That it's to match what's out there.
Well, I certainly trust staff. I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lippert.
I also totally trust staff, but I had the exact same question of match which roof, match which, and especially about the gutter and the downspouts, because I may have missed it, but I didn't see other gutters and downspouts to be matched. I think in this particular case, it would be important that the gutter and downspout are a dark bronze to blend in with the timber. Let me just see if I had anything else.
Can I address that?
Sure.
I'm sorry, can I address that real quick? The roof will match every other roof out there, which is it's a terracotta. And the downspouts will be dark bronze. That's pretty much all the accents that are vertical are dark bronze. The railings, the fake louvers, all that, so.
That's good to hear, because that's, but my recommendation would still be to include both of those colors in the conditions, saying they are to match the existing terracotta and the gutter and downspouts to be a dark bronze. I think that helps everybody understand exactly which elements are being matched. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McAllister.
I think it looks great. I have no comment.
Thank you. Mr. Molesky,
Same thing, looks good to me. Thank you, guys.
Mr. Karstens?
I think it looks great. The only thing I'll add architecturally would be is a treatment for the post base. I know San Miguel's, they have more of a substantial kind of stucco base. I'm not sure about Scott's, but I'd recommend either if Scott's and that other place doesn't have necessarily a trim associated with the post base, maybe just putting a 1x8 with a chamfer and making it 12 to 18 inches off the ground. Yeah, there's San Miguel's has, theirs are built up. The previous, that Top Dog one, it's hard to tell if it's got anything, but it looks like at least the brackets might be obscured or concealed. And I'm not sure about, like I said, I'm not sure about Scott's, how theirs finishes out, but it would be a suggestion just to give it a cleaner look at the bottom, not necessarily messing with any of the brackets up top though, so.
Can I address it real quick?
Yes.
Yeah.
So San Miguel's was the first one that we did. Scott's was the third one, and it was supposed to match the base. Unfortunately, the builder did not do that. So what they have is a simple actual post bracket. What we're proposing here is what's on Bucci's, which would be a knife plate detail. So you can't really see, you can kind of see the knife plate in there. So it's a little more than just, it won't be just an exposed bracket, it'll be a knife plate. So it's gonna match Scott's in a way, but it'll have a cleaner look with the knife plate instead of bracket. That, we chose not to do it on this one. Originally we had that base, but since Scott's is right next to it, we found it to be important to somewhat match that. San Miguel's is the one that's all the way down the other end, so.
Right.
That's what Scott was supposed to look like, sorry. Yeah.
That's all right.
All right, Mr. Bassett.
But what about that? Just have a question about the timbers themselves. I'm okay with it, especially since it matches the rest, and since the associations have approved the change and everything. But I do have a question about the timbers. They appear to be, natural, unstained. Is Scott's stained, or is it just that it's newer than the others? I know the San Miguel's looks a little bit aged at this point. Has Scott's had a finish put on it, or is it just newer?
None of them had a finish. They're all that natural.
I mean, my only concern, and I'm not interested in making it a condition. It's more of just kind of a recommendation or suggestion that they be stained, maybe especially the portions that will age or wear. These buildings have recently been refinished. The residential sections, finally look nicer. The roofing has been redone. They've been painted. It looks kind of fresh and clean. And having those timbers stained in a finish that would, kind of look better over time would be, I think, more appealing to me than kind of naturally aging in place.
Question, Ryan. If we stain them, then they look different from the other three as they age?
Yeah, and so that's why I'm not suggesting that it be made a condition. I mean, I know, can't go back to the others and say, hey, they're starting to look a little worn, go ahead and paint those too. But I would think all of them painted to match would look nicer.
Thank you. I think the project looks fine. I don't have any comments, and I'll leave it up to someone to make a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Thank you.
I move that we approve DRB 002573 2021 as submitted.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I would like to amend that motion.
All right.
that it be noted that the roof be terracotta and the gutter and downspouts be dark bronze.
Thank you. Anyone else? Is there a second?
I'll second with the amendments made by Mrs. Lippert.
Thank you. Teresa, please call the roll.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Miss Lippert,
Yes.
Mr. McAllister,
Yes.
Mr. Molesky,
Yes.
Mr. Karstens,
Yes.
Mr. Bassett,
Yes.
Miss Foss.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. We will now move on to Lucky Rooster DRB-002646-2021.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if I might, the staff sensed a little hesitancy on your all's part. If you see something that staff missed, staff appreciate your eyes, so call us out on it. It's all good. Anyway, that having been said, Lucky Rooster, the goal of this project is the alteration. The goal of this alteration is to give the Lucky Rooster an exterior appearance that is more compatible with the adjacent architecture. The scope of work proposed is a limited exterior modification of the existing restaurant that includes modifying the facade of the existing covered patio structure to simplify the material palette and clean up the lines of the structure, construct a new wood-framed copper awning across the entry to the dining patio to decrease sun impact on evening diners, paint the existing facade and exterior portion of the patio dining structure. The simplified darker paint scheme should neutralize the busyness of the current facade and the multitude of existing materials and textures. Replace the existing silver metal roof panels on the awning with an unlacquered copper, which will naturally weather to a dark brown. Reduce the number of gooseneck light fixtures and replace those fixtures with similar lights in an unlacquered copper finish. Staff recommends approval with the condition that a planting plan is submitted. So you can see the site here. I've outlined the entire parcel in red, but the specific building or section of the building in question is it within the circle. 278, Highway 278 is running sort of diagonal through your screen. These are some photos of the existing structure and the shopping center. Here's a demolition plan and the new floor plan for the patio. Elevations, both existing and proposed, existing on the bottom and proposed at the top. Again, the west elevation existing at the bottom, proposed at the top. So this is the elevation that faces William Hilton Parkway or Highway 278. And illustrations of the building. Now, in speaking with the applicant regarding these planter boxes, they said they could pull the vines away, then paint, and then put them back. And staff appreciates that, but I'm not sure how that vine is going to climb up this clapboard and what's going to happen in this window, in front of this window. So that's why staff is suggesting that maybe a quick planting plan is in order to address these new elements to the structure. And that concludes staff's recommendation or presentation.
Thank you. Is the applicant available?
Hello, good afternoon. Pleasure to be with you all. My name is David Thompson. I'm the architect for the project based out of Charleston, and happy to be working with you guys for the first time, hopefully not the last. Our clients are on as well in case there's any questions I'm unable to answer. I think Chris pretty well covered it. Really just wanted to sort of go through a tidying up exercise while they're making some improvements by adding an outdoor bar to the existing patio. Wanted to, my perception of the property when I viewed it for the first time and visited was that the patio architecture almost felt too distinct from the building architecture, and the two of them didn't necessarily reflect the way I felt when I went into the restaurant either. So I think this proposal not only sort of cleans up what the consistency of identity is from inside out, but also makes it more compatible with the overall shopping center. There's very little work proposed, a little bit of framing to kind of clean up the parapet lines at the patio, and then predominantly paint changes and light fixtures swapped out with a reduction of lighting as well. So I think the colored renderings pretty well capture what the goals of the project are. I have spoken with staff about the plants. I'm confident that they could be removed but left intact. I think I agree that depending on what that species is, it may or may not want to adhere itself back to a smooth finish hardy siding. If it is desired by the board for us to retrain those vines to cover the entirety of the parapet, we're not opposed to it. We could install some stainless steel wire trainers, would be one way to do it. Open to suggestions. If the vines aren't necessarily what's preferable, I'm happy to come back to staff with a planting plan for that particular planter bed. Otherwise, open to any questions you have, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. We'll start with discussion with Mr. Bassett.
Yes, I like the project. Appreciate the concept of kind of bringing it together. I agree it's a little bit incongruous with the existing Lucky Rooster part of the complex. I don't know that I'd necessarily try to make it work with the rest of the more dated storefronts there, but I like the changes and kind of pulling it all together. I think it makes sense as an overall project. I do agree with staff that a planting plan is needed, especially since that's kind of the, one of the more obvious facades and what you really see from the street and as you're approaching. I don't know that, I don't feel like it's all that necessary really to preserve the vines as they would grow up on the clapboard. I don't know if it's, I don't know how desirable that is to have it going up the smooth face, but I do like the idea of the greenery kind of working within the lattice portions and covering that up some with some greenery and foliage. But I'd kind of defer to the judgment of the landscape architects, but it seems like something in a planter box in front of that flat wall might be better to, kind of break up that wall some, and might be a cleaner look long-term than vines growing on it.
Thank you. Mr. Karstens?
This is certainly a unique spot when it comes to kind of a retrofit of a strip center and what was done a few years back. I certainly think that this upfit will help out well. Initially, I wasn't sure if the ability to tie into the roof line over the main building would make it more harmonious, but then I see obviously there's a break, kind of between the two features. I think the idea of the overall color scheme continuing helps out a lot. I've always seen the vines and kind of that growth there as a nice feature. I think between that and the planter boxes, this is definitely kind of an urban treatment when it comes to being able to soften a facade. So I'd be in favor of, retaining the existing vines as much as possible. If need be, setting up, a support system. If it was feeling like maybe that they wouldn't do as well, I mean, I certainly would reestablish potentially maybe the ones that were running up the taller sections. I'll let Mr. McAllister, if he's got any experience in kind of working with this, certainly with the growth of material, it wouldn't be but a few years, or even a couple seasons for it to reestablish itself. But I'm in favor of retaining as much as possible, and if not, just supplanting so that you get that same aesthetic. System-wise, I would say whatever works best with the siding. If the thought is that you're going to establish a wire system, I mean, I think the good thing is it gives you a better kind of parameters to train that to. If that was going to be the case, obviously stainless steel is the best. Granted, we try to stay away from stainless steel, but in this case, with something growing on it, that's the best treatment. But I certainly like the treatment overall, and I'll be interested in seeing what Annette thinks about the height of the wall or the height of the parapet above the roof, considering that on most all the other facades, there's at least a sign or a light fixture or something that kind of breaks that up. I don't know if it's a short enough section of parapet that she doesn't feel concerned about that, but I certainly am not. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Molesky?
Thank you. The only comment I have here, and this is, hey, David, how's it going? Hey, John, I wanted to ask the two planters that are on that radius corner there that kind of, front the whole center. I know that they were there existing. Not sure what the purpose is of those, and is there anything more that could be done? Because that just seems like maybe we're holding on to the past, and there's, I don't know, I think a greater opportunity for that area right there. I don't know if you guys did any studies or had any other suggestions, if you're allowed to play with that area at all.
David, if I could step in, John, I think I have an answer to your question. And by no means it is not set in stone. So however this board wants to go, staff wanted, when this initially came up, when this patio came up to be covered, staff had suggested that there be a tree island there to add some green to that corner. The applicant wanted seating where people waiting to be seated in the restaurant could relax. And this was, the two planter boxes were the compromise. Again, that doesn't mean that you all have to stick with them or what, but that was the reasoning behind the planter boxes.
Thank you. It doesn't seem like much of a compromise, but I'd love to hear, David, what you guys went through, your little exercise on that.
Well, to be honest, that application was before my time, and we haven't really spoken much about those planters, if at all. I'm certainly open, I don't want to speak out of turn, but that might not even have been current ownership when those happened. Tom or David, I don't know if you guys want to chime in and add anything to it. I would imagine that we would be amenable to either supplementing what's currently planted in them or revisiting the subject entirely.
This is Tom. We can do that. We hadn't considered those planters as part of the scope of what we were trying to do. But now that they're pointed out, I think maybe way back when something more creative may have suited that area. And so we're open to that. It's the first time I've thought about it, so I don't actually have any ideas and would appreciate hearing.
Okay. Well, thanks. Yeah, because again, I know when I drive up and down 278, that's what catches my eye. And I'm not sure from a landlord tenant, position whose purview that falls under. But it just seems like that's a missed opportunity there. And since you're, already putting forth these efforts as you are for that outside dining area, it seems like a great opportunity just to tie all that in. Because if not, I'm sure we'll probably see you guys back sooner than later with a presentation for that area once it's all said and done. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Lippert.
Thank you. I have a question about the copper roof, because while I see that you're saying it's going to patina to a brown, I mean, my understanding is really that's just the first stage of the patina, and then it's actually going to go to turquoise. And I'm going to expand that question. I don't believe I saw a cut sheet for the goosenecks. And so even if that comes in a copper finish, I would presume that that one would be a sealed copper color or maybe even a galvanized. So now we're getting a disjuncture between the roof and the lighting. And if the hope is to have it go to dark brown, I guess I'm just asking why we're not starting with a dark bronze roof, if that's sort of the ultimate goal. And maybe David, you can speak to that.
Yep, gladly. So the light fixtures, I will admittedly acknowledge that I didn't remember until this morning that they were not part of the package. I emailed it to Chris way too late. They are an unlacquered copper finish on the light fixtures so that they're also meant to patina so that we wouldn't have differing finishes on those. My selection for copper, and you're correct, it will continue to go to a full verdigris at some point. In our environment, it's going to happen quicker than in others, but I don't think it's in the next 10 to 20 years, more than likely, maybe pieces and parts of it. So I think for our lifespan, the majority of what we're going to see is going to be more in the browns. And that said, if it lives long enough to reach that full verdigris, I think that's great. And it works color-wise as far as I'm concerned. I just prefer a living finish and something that's going to give some more patina and character to the project. It would certainly be less expensive for the client if we went with a pre-finished like dark bronze panel, and not opposed to that, but I prefer and enjoy kind of the natural age of what would happen with a real copper roof.
Annette.
Okay, no, I appreciate that explanation.
I'm sorry.
I think it is important.
Annette, I'm sorry to interrupt. If you're interested, I do have, and if the board's interested, I do have those cut sheets for your review, if you want to look at them.
That would be great. Because my next comment on the goosenecks is that I think they need to be mounted in a manner that they don't project above the parapet of the main volume of the building. And they appear to be in all but one condition, always a pairing of lights. So I think that one condition should also be a pairing, particularly, even though I realize it's under separate permit, appears to be a third location for signage. So I think those need to be a pairing. My final comment is about the awning on the new parapet element. And to me, while I certainly understand that you're trying to simplify and you're trying to unify, the parapet on the main volume or main building, the restaurant building, is creating a volume. The parapet on the terrace is a plane. So to me, they are different. And I think that the awning that attaches to the parapet of the terrace, A, needs to be higher, and B, should not be a closed volume and instead be an open canopy, potentially with a bracket detail underneath. It can be a modern bracket to it because I understand that you're trying to keep very simple lines. We'll see what the rest of the board has to say on those comments. I've been convinced by your explanation about the copper. So thank you for that explanation. Those are all my comments.
I'm sorry, can I respond about the lighting?
Yes.
Okay, the lights shown are in the existing conditions with existing quantities, which is why there's one over the South Island Square and not two. That was the only rationale behind that, is there's currently one, so it's just a like for like swap out. And similar selection of the actual gooseneck to what's there existing. That said, the same company makes different styles, so if we need to reselect one that doesn't flare above the height of the parapet, I'm totally open to that if that's what the board prefers, and equally understanding of an open end to the awning with a bracket detail. That no objection there. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I just may respond on the single fixture, the difference being that before it was fixtures wrapping around the entire building. So it wasn't so much a one standout single fixture. It was kind of a wrapping where the spacing happened to be tighter in one location. That's why, to me, now we're left with two sets of pairs and one single, which why to me it needs to be a pairing or just completely eliminate it.
Thank you. Mr. McAllister.
Thank you. Overall, I think this is a great improvement to the site. Really like the copper. I think when it starts to patina, it's going to look really nice. I have really no comments, nothing to add on the architecture. I do tend to agree with Mrs. Lippert's comment about the gooseneck fixture. If there's a way to select a fixture, something that doesn't exceed above the top of the wall, the parapet, I think that would be preferable. And then as far as the planter goes, to me, just kind of looking at it through the lens of the design guideline, I think it meets it however you want, if you want the vines or not. I think keeping the vines up the existing lattice is kind of nice. Because it is sort of a unique feature, and I think Mr. Carson said it right. It's sort of an urban thing, and it's a good solution for introducing some green in a tight space. I do think you're going to have a hard time getting it to climb up the siding, but to me, I think that's your guys' preference. But I think clarifying with staff with some sort of plan on what is going to happen. So I do think during the construction activities, it's likely going to get impacted in one way or another. So I would just leave it at, staff's comment of providing some sort of plan for staff review. I think, again, if you can make an effort to save stuff, I think that's great, but just clarifying it on a plan would be appropriate. Otherwise, I think it looks good, and those are all of my comments.
Thank you. Mr. Brown.
Support the application. I support staff's comments. I agree with the comment about the lowering the gooseneck lighting. I do think the awning would look better raised at the parapet at the patio area. And to me, spending a lot of time mid-island, the planter boxes as they currently exist, they just look and feel like an afterthought. So not that it would necessarily need to come back to this board, but I would encourage the applicant to work with staff to see if there is something that you may want to do there that could better represent the Lucky Rooster. Thank you.
Thank you. I had a minor comment in that what is the south elevation is mislabeled as the north elevation on your elevations. The west one is right, but the other one should be south, just for the record. I agree that the gooseneck fixture shouldn't go above the wall. I'm uncertain about the awning being open. I'll leave that to other people. I don't mind it the way it is at all. I do like the copper. And I agree that the vines should be there. If they don't last through construction, they need to be replaced. And I would like the idea of having the stainless steel pieces to retrain the ivy if it lasts. The front planters, I think the idea that first came across when I wasn't here, that the tree should be planted there, would have been great. But maybe those planters could use 2 taller plants in them, and maybe some of the vine in the bottom, around the bottom of the taller plant, to kind of cascade down the side of the planters, might break them up and make them look less like boxes. I think we've talked about everything. I'm okay with the single light fixture where it is. I think once those gooseneck arms don't rise above the walls, they won't be as noticeable. I think that's all I have. Does anyone have further discussion points? If not, may I have a motion on the application?
Well, maybe I am gonna ask for one more round on that
Okay.
awning. I know the applicant said he was okay with raising it. Maybe getting a little bit more input from the board on that awning.
I think the applicant said he was okay with opening it, but not raising it. Is that correct, David?
Oh,
That's correct. The owner requested the awning because they get some pretty deep sun infiltration and they've had a lot of complaints. So they were trying to cut down on the amount of sun into the patio. That was part of the reason it's positioned where it is. And actually we've lowered the opening into the patio for the same reason. So I was open to redesigning the end condition of the bracket, but we would prefer to keep it at the height shown.
Thank you.
well, I'm extra glad I double checked about the comments. I guess my take is, particularly if it's gonna stay low, then I would feel yet more strongly about it being open. Because right now it feels like a very heavy add-on object. And I think it would help get lightened up since it cannot go up and maintain its functionality. Maybe we can have a quick round on the board from that, on that topic, and then I'd be happy to make a motion.
Sure, we'll go in order again, starting with Mr. Bassett.
I have a question about the end treatment on that awning as it exists in the, as proposed. Is that painted to match, or is it clad in copper? What's the current treatment on the end of that?
It would be clad, but there would be at least one, if not 2 seams in it. It's shown as if it's sort of a flat panel, which I don't think I'm going to get flat stock that big. So there would be a drip edge at the top. We would continue the same fascia detailing around the side. And then we would have like a vertical flat seam, same widths to match the seams on the roof itself.
Yeah, I'm still kind of torn on that. I like the idea of a bracket. It feels unsupported if it's not open. But the other one isn't either. I'm torn on whether it needs to be elevated, or the top needs to be elevated and change the slope and not have it work at the same, on the same plane as the other and at the same pitch as the other roof line. Right now this kind of ties it all in together pretty well, but changing that would modify the whole idea that it makes it all look like one structure. So I think I would lean toward some sort of bracket detail or support detail, even if one also had to be added at the far end of the existing structure. I know it's already kind of, just kind of butts into the wall at this end where it says South Island Square. But I kind of look forward to other discussion on that.
Thank you, Mr. Karstens. Your thoughts?
I don't know, if we're seeing it as a distinct element, then, and to Net's point, making it, feel more substantial, then I'd be up for having the open end. But if for simplicity's sake, if it feels like it's going to be more in keeping with the remainder of the complex, I'd be fine with the solid end. I could go either way, really. I guess was more sold on the elevations and the fact that it looked a little more contiguous with the rest of them being solid. But if Net's not seeing that, and then again, if we could see a detail for that, or if the detail was straightforward on that end, then I'd be up for that. So I'm kind of I'm kind of in the middle. I mean, I could go either way, really, to be honest.
Thank you. Mr. McAllister?
I am in agreement with Ms. Lippert. I think having it open-ended and some sort of bracket detail would, to me, make it look a little more finished.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
I agree with opening the awning.
Thank you. I could go either way. I think when it's closed, it matches what's existing on the building, but I think what we're looking at is an exterior patio, and that's a little more rustic than an interior. So if it's open, it might identify that more as an open area. So does that help, Annette?
It does help. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I would like to make a motion for DRB 002646-2021 for approval with the following conditions. Staff comments, in particular to provide a planting plan and reconvene with staff if the vines do not survive the repainting. To work with staff to review if there is a revision to the planter boxes. To include a stainless steel wire system in the areas potentially of the lap siding and window, so that those vines might continue to grow. To lower the goosenecks or revise the brackets type so that it does not project above the parapet wall for staff approval. To revise the elevation tag to mark the south elevation. To modify the awning at the terrace to be an open detailing with some brackets. That concludes my motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Teresa, please call the roll.
Certainly. Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Lippert?
Yes.
Mr. Karsten?
Yes.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Mr. Bassett?
Yes.
Ms. Foss?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Hope to see you again.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet y'all.
We will move on to new development conceptual Spanish Wells Office Warehouse DRB-002659-2021. Ms. Lippert will be recusing herself from this project. Chris?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Spanish Wells Office and Warehouse Project is a new building being proposed adjacent to Resurrection Church. The building consists of the following characteristics. One, the building is a single-story, 6,593 square foot pre-engineered metal building shell for the potential of up to 6 office and/or warehouse tenant spaces. 2, the building features sloped roof forms, wood bracketed awnings, decorative louvers, aluminum storefront doors, and windows and stucco veneer with trim. 3, colors, while not yet selected, will be harmonious with the surrounding buildings and landscape and meet the intent of the design guide. So it's important to note that this is a conceptual review. Because this is new construction, this is conceptual review, and it'll be coming back to the DRB for final. Staff recommends approval with the following conditions. Revise the rear elevation to include more architectural detail, and revise the landscape plan to include more evergreen species in the street buffer. The site is on your screen outlined in red. Resurrection Church, the building is here, and the proposed construction site is on this back side here with entrance and parking running through here between the two roads. I think it's important to note that there is a power line easement running down that other road and across Spanish Wells as shown here. And you can see that power line easement there. Further down that road, that dirt road, this is the site looking from the church building across the parking lot. Again, the site as it exists. Again, looking at it from the path that runs parallel to Spanish Wells. That's the church building, the parking lot. Here's a survey. And the proposed site plan. So you can see the additional units running along here. Spanish Wells Road is out here along with that path. And this is the dirt road we looked at. Roof plan. So this is the rear elevation of the building. Staff is concerned that there just needs to be some more architectural detail. Doesn't have to be elaborate, but needs to break up and not be a wall. This is the front. You can see the bracketed awnings. Proposed elevation of the building. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you. Is the applicant available?
The applicant is here. This is Jason Bruni with Court Atkins Architects. Let me see if I can get my video to work. And I have Ken with me as well. He is the landscape architect.
Thank you. You have 10 minutes to add to Chris's narrative.
Thank you. Not a lot to add, just appreciate the report, Chris, and just to add a few things to that. What we're looking to do is basically create just about a 6,500 square foot building shell that will eventually be leased by several different tenants. The purpose of the building is, again, storage and warehouse space. So just trying to keep, being adjacent to the church and the church's stucco and roof or sloped roof structures, we're keying off of that as far as for the building form and materials. Looking at Chris's comments, the rear elevation, certainly we'll take another look at that. We do have to study the HVAC units, which we plan on putting on the ground in the rear of the building there, and being not within the building setbacks. So we've got a little bit of work to do on that rear elevation to find some notches and relief there for HVAC units, but definitely we'll take a look at that. And I don't know if you got anything to add, Ken, from a landscaping perspective.
Basically, I had worked with Rocky on the landscaping prior to his departure, and it was my understanding he'd signed off on it, but we're certainly more than willing to make some modifications. We're kind of constrained in that buffer area because the path occupies so much of a percentage of it. But the three redbuds and dogwoods that are on the building side of the sidewalk we can certainly change to something like cypress, Leyland cypress or something like that. What I would like is, since there's nothing existing really between that area and the building, technically it should all be in the buffer, but I'd like to be able to kind of stagger them so that they actually intrude into the buffer area. I mean, the non-buffer area between the buffer and the building. If we can have that kind of leeway, I'd appreciate it. And like I said, we have no problem with changing some of those plants to more evergreen species.
Thank you. We'll start with a discussion with Mr. Brown.
My comments are pretty quick. With respect to the buffer, absolutely, whatever the width of the pathway is, I would compensate that and plant into the site. I know buffering that area will be important. Rear elevation, I had the same comment. It's very monolithic. I know Jason will look at that. I had a note about mechanical equipment. You had already mentioned that. Dumpster enclosure, there's a dumpster on the site that isn't enclosed. I would incorporate a dumpster enclosure with the final plan. There's some outbuildings on the site, but I see that they are not on the final site development plan, so that's a non-issue. And then the final comment with respect to setback, I might just check that awning to make sure it does not protrude into the setback. But all in all, I support the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McAllister.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm in agreement with staff's comments. I think rear elevation needs a little bit of work, and I almost wonder if the roof could have a little bit more of an overhang, if that would help it. Just kind of putting that out there to see if it sticks with anybody on the board. And as far as the landscape, support staff's comment, and also notice that we're proposing a couple of rain gardens. So when this comes back for final, we'll be interested in how that's going to get treated. And those are all of my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Molesky.
Yes, thanks. I'm sure the rear elevation there will probably be addressed maybe with running stucco there. I wanted to ask on that rear elevation there with the doors that I see. I'm not clear. What is the pathway on there? When I look at the site plan, I guess it's pretty tight. Is there?
I would suspect this just more for a emergency egress, but that the front doors and the front overhead doors would be the doors that be utilized.
Okay, so those doors in the back, we'll just assume, like you said, emergency egress. Is there just going to be grass or mulch, or is that to be?
It's a grass behind the building.
It's just ground cover.
Just grass currently is proposed in that back area.
Okay, is there any foundation planting requirements or?
There are in the buffer. There's some trees and landscaping. We don't have any. I don't see any foundation plantings along the building on the rear.
They have a buffer requirement that requires a certain number of overstory, understory, and shrubs, but no per se foundation requirement.
Actually, I think because the uses are identical, the project next door is also zoned the same light industrial. I'm almost positive that there is no quote unquote buffer requirement. It's just building setback.
Staff will be happy to check that, but I believe the adjacent property is undeveloped. And there's the distinction between zoning and adjacent use. But we'll certainly help check that and eliminate the buffer if that can be done.
Okay, looking at the elevations, the roof overhang at the gabled section seems pretty short. Is that meant to be a 12-inch or?
I think I believe it's 18 or 24. I will double check, but I can certainly not opposed to studying that. If we have to go 24 or even a little bit longer, we can look at that. That's fine.
Okay, so in the picture here, those gabled ends don't look like they're anywhere near that, unless I'm missing something. You're saying that this is intended to have an 18 to 24 inch overhang at the gables. I meant, I'm sorry, I don't know the correct roofing technique for it, but how much it projects past the vertical facade of the building.
I got the rake side.
Yes.
It's probably 8 to 12. I wouldn't want to go more than 12, but if we need to increase it a little bit, we can look at that. I can study that. That's fine. The rake side.
Okay, thank you with that. When I look at the, we'll call it like the front elevation, the parking lot elevation, to the left and right of the doors, are those side lights, are those panels, are those faux shutters or aluminum shutters? What's?
Those are side lights for the first, I guess call it, if you're loading from left to right, the first 4 doors, those would be side lights. And then the last 2, it would be stucco. So there wouldn't be side lights on the last 2.
Okay. And then that little horizontal element on those side lights, I guess maybe that's what.
Just a mullion, just a window mullion.
Okay. I guess maybe that doesn't feel as necessary. I don't know if those side lights will look better if they more or less match the doors with the style and rail pattern, perhaps.
I'm not opposed to studying that or looking at different mold patterns. We can look at that.
Okay, and then I guess above the shed roof, that's actually future signage and not a transom, or?
Correct, future signage.
Okay, and again, this could be 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, but in the center, or the shed roof kind of connects those 2 doors. Perhaps if they were kept separate, it would make them feel like they're all individual spaces. Again, not a big deal, just making that suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess when we look at the front elevation with the landscaping imposed on it, I guess it looks like some of that center doors and signage all gets blocked by maybe a live oak tree or something.
There is a tree in one of the, it's in the island.
Yeah, you're right on it there.
So it's right. So it's out of
Live oaks.
Yeah, live oaks out more up front.
Okay, but that's no concern for blocking that signage or the lighting or the canopy of that tree doesn't impede on that building, and how much will the footers and whatnot on that building? I mean, it looks like it might be pretty close, but I don't know how big is that oak?
I mean, we got the 5-foot sidewalk plus half a parking stall.
Mm-hmm.
We're at 10, 12 feet away.
Right. So we don't necessarily expect that tree to have to interfere with the building during the course of construction. That would be the only caution there.
I wouldn't think so. We're pretty standard in doing things like that.
Yeah, those are my only comments right there. Again, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Staff has just checked out the buffer requirement, and because it is light industrial, there's light industrial to light industrial does not have a buffer, irregardless of if it's developed or none. So there is no buffer required along this back side.
As I said, Rocky and I went over this in detail, and he had signed off, but like I said, we're more than willing to make some changes on the street side there for sure.
Thank you. Mr. Karstens?
Thank you. I just wanted to answer Mr. Molesky. I think these are all planted trees, so there's no existing trees within the parking lot right now that would be impacted by the construction. I think that might have been I don't know if that was where you might have been heading with the comments as far as how close they were. Yes. Yeah, there's an easement up front for that pathway, so I think there's definitely some leniency when it comes to satisfying the buffer and the space with which it is in. Knowing that it's pretty dense along the roadway, keeping the site triangles open in this area is important. I'd recommend connecting the sidewalk that's in front of these units to the asphalt trail, just allowing, whatever kind of foot traffic you might have, or just a kind of a continuity, considering the church next door also has a connection. To Mr. Brown's point about a dumpster, just making sure that that's clear within the site plan, where the dumpsters are located and access and how they're being treated, even if it's something associated with the church. And, knowing these elevations, I think when it comes to the treatment and what they are, I think it's well done. I'll piggyback on everybody's comments as far as some of the overhangs, but also, it'll be important to kind of see how these color schemes work out. Oftentimes when we have these big doors, that's, the color scheme will help to kind of give it some character and differentiate it. So we'll see that obviously with final. But all in all, one last thing, instead of the palmettos in that frontmost separator between the pathway and the first bay of parking, again, going back to the view triangles, I don't know if the palmetto trunks are more of an obscure, will obscure views more than, say, just a single canopy tree trunk. So I'd suggest looking at that. I'm certainly not against palmettos again, something nice and native that breaks up the monotony. But all in all, I think it's a great first start, and look forward to seeing it as it progresses. Though there's no plantings required along the back of the building, it might be well advised that over the course of construction, the potential for introducing these pines or wax myrtles should probably be held in, maybe. I know oftentimes when there's a vacant lot that's wooded, it's the onus ends up being on those people coming in last to make the most of screening and buffering. But if there's some room on property, and ultimately I'd recommend, kind of taking care of your own side. So I wouldn't necessarily exclude the plantings you're showing, Jim. I think that's a good start, and I appreciate it. So thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could add some things. We can't alter, the DRB can't alter the location of the buffer. So we can't allow, the planting that's in the buffer has to be in the buffer. You can't move that line, that street buffer. So that planting is going to have to be in there. I understand that the path takes up a big chunk of that, but we just can't move that around. The other thing, Jason, we talked about the utilities in the back. Let me double check and see if that's affected by the buffer, if there's no buffer there, if that affects the utility location. But I'll coordinate with you on that.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I make a comment?
Yes.
Chris, I would encourage staff to really look at what the intent to the adjacent street buffer is. And the intent isn't to pack as many plants into a small area as possible. And I'll just leave it at that, but I would like to provide some flexibility if possible.
And I understand that and appreciate that. The intent of a buffer is to help screen and mitigate the building that's behind it. There's the plants in the buffer come along with protections. And so that planting that's then outside that buffer doesn't have that same protection.
Thank you. Dropped my pen. Mr. Bassett?
Yeah, I like, I think the front elevation looks good. My concern, I share staff's concern, I guess, about the rear elevation needing some more architectural detailing, especially if a buffer isn't required back there to kind of shield that side of the building. When the adjacent property is cleared, you'll probably have a view directly at the back of it as you're driving down Spanish Wells Road. So I think it becomes even though it, feels like the back of the building that won't be very visible, I think it becomes even more visible as time goes on. So I think, a little bit more detailing on the back is warranted, just to, soften that kind of monotonous line of the warehouse building. And that's the only comment I really had.
Thank you. Can you answer a question, Jason? Does the church and this building, are they going to share that parking lot?
There's, it is shared parking, but there's also parking to the right-hand side of the church building as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I know it's not part of this package, but there's a sign for the church right in front of the new proposed building. Are you gonna move that and put a new sign for the tenants in this place, or do you have any idea yet?
Don't know. That's a good question. I've definitely, I can find out an answer to that and get it back to Chris.
Thank you. Chris, do you mind showing me a photo of the church? Jason, how much overhang do you think the church has?
Pretty substantial,
Yeah.
a couple feet.
So I might suggest also, I agree that maybe if you could look at the overhangs on your building. I agree that it shouldn't be as big as this, but maybe increase them a little bit. Great comment about the dumpster, the sidewalk to the path is a good comment too. You will have to be careful with signage though, if something like that happens. And let me see if I got any other notes here. I think that's it. Does any of the board have any further discussion? If not, can I get
clarification on one item?
Sure.
Somebody mentioned they wanted more information about the rain garden, I believe it was, as part of the drainage retention system. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was my comment. I just noticed it's a
They're in
proposed feature.
The engineering package. I can certainly get something from Andrews Engineering, but if you take a look at the engineering package, that should show you everything you need to know about the rain gardens.
My comment was mostly how is it going to be grassed? Is it going to be planted? It's just really what the treatment of it is,
That would be in the engineering package as well.
Okay, well, since that's a proposed feature on this package, I think we need to know that at final. We need to see that plan.
Okay, we're going to include that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, can I get a motion on the application?
I'll make a motion regarding Spanish Wells Office Warehouse Building, DRB 002659-2021 for approval with the following conditions. Revise the rear elevation to include more architectural detail. Revise the landscape plan to include more evergreen species in the street buffer. Clarify the dumpster location on the site plan. At final, clarify how the rain garden will be treated. Connect the sidewalk in front of the building to the bike path. And restudy the roof overhangs.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
Madam Chair, if I might, is the dumpster location, is it just clarifying the dumpster location? Is that all that's involved, or is there a screen?
I think we need to see a screen for sure.
That was my comment, yes.
But we'll amend Mr. McAllister's to add screening for the dumpster as well as the location.
I'd like to second the motion.
Thank you. Teresa, please call the roll.
Certainly. Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. McAllister,
Yes.
Mr. Molesky,
Yes.
Mr. Karstens,
Yes.
Mr. Bassett,
Yes.
Ms. Foss.
Yes,
Motion carries 6-0.
thank you. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, everyone.
With all these finished, does the board have any further business they would like to talk about? No? Chris, do we have a minor corridor report?
We do. And I'll run through it quickly because it's.
We get to see your face. We never see your face.
Hello. I'll run through it quickly because there's a bunch, but if you have a question, please let me know, okay? 90 Folly Field was Islanders Guardhouse Station. 23 South Forest Beach was Omni Courtyard revisions. 91 Lighthouse was an antenna modification. That's a telecommunication antenna. 437 William Hilton Parkway was some alteration to the windows. That is the subway building that went from round top to squares. 70 Pope is Circle Center landscape. They're modifying that landscape. 7 is Palmetto Business Park. It is an antenna modification. 16 Finch is a building expansion. It's a small building expansion. It's not visible from Beach City Road, so it didn't come to you. 92 Folly is another antenna modification. 1 South Forest Beach is an antenna modification, and 5 Augusta Lane is an antenna modification. And again, those antenna modifications are all telecommunication that staff handles, but have to come to DRB. And that's it.
Thank you. You brought up the subway. I noticed they painted that little canopy over the border and it looks a lot better.
Yes,
May I
ma'am.
just-
Yes, ma'am. And I'll just add that if you're paying attention, there's some McDonald's stuff that went in contrary to the DRB approval, and they're painting that as well. It should have been taken care of yesterday, but we're on it.
Oh, good. Anything
May
else?
I just-
Go ahead.
May I just ask, and maybe I missed it, I'm seeing maybe it's just repairs, but it looks maybe like a modification on St. Francis Thrift Shop. Was that on your list, Chris, or is that under either purviews?
Yes, there were some modifications. That must have been earlier. You are correct. There are modifications to the facade at St. Francis. They were approved at staff level because we didn't think they rose to the DRB level. The colors should be similar to what was out there. And that's how they got through.
I mean, I think they look good. I just, when I'm driving around, I noticed it and I must have missed it when you said it last.
Please bring it up. I don't know. I mean, I don't know which report. I mean, I know that that's an old approval, but I am all ears. If you see anything or have a question, please let me know. If I can't rectify it then, we'll certainly use it when we look at other things in the future so that we're in compliance and in step with you all.
And behind Subway, the Home Goods building, I know they've submitted for approval in the past prior to the time that I was on the DRB. And right now they have a tar paper roof. I'm sure that wasn't, approved as a final surface, but how long will that be permitted to stay? I understand they have to stop leaks, but what's the situation there?
Building permits can run for a considerable amount of time as long as they're meeting some inspections along. So I can't tell you that it's going to be done in 6 months. I don't know. That is a perennial problem. Staff is aware of that on many levels, and we've been trying to deal with it. So I can't tell you when it's going to be done. I'm sorry. Just don't know.
We never
The
gave
ferns
them
were more
any
nature
approvals.
blending.
You're right, Kathy, you're right. DRB, they came to the DRB with some massive changes and they were never approved for those changes. They came back with some minor DRB landscape changes and hardscape changes that we could approve at the staff level. So these are all just, these changes should all just be maintenance.
Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Anyone else? That said, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all.